Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Old Economy Village. I'm Michael Knecht. I'm the site administrator for Old Economy Village. And on behalf of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission, the Friends of Old Economy Village, our staff, our volunteers, and our members, I want to thank you for coming out this evening to help us kick off our Centennial celebration. It was 100 years ago today, on February 3rd, 1916, that the court case was settled between the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the Harmonists Society. And on this day, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania took ownership of the two core blocks of what was the town of Economy. So, now we're here to talk about how this all got started. And let me just say, when I started here a little over 4 years ago, this is a very complicated and complex story to try to get your hands around. And even though I think I understand it, I'm sure it's going to take me a lifetime to better understand it. And one of the things that really troubled me about Old Economy Village, and one of the reasons that excited me about talking a little bit about it tonight, is when the lawsuit was settled 100 years ago, one of the things that was settled in the lawsuit, or that was stated in the lawsuit, was the Harmony Society was not a religious society. And that really irked me. But I think by the time we get to the end of the program tonight, you'll have a better understanding of it. You may not agree with it, and I'm not sure I agree with it either, but we will get to that. So tonight we're here to celebrate and commemorate 100 years of Old Economy Village. Followers, the Harmony Society. And the story, as we all know it, is they emigrated from Wurttemberg, Germany, because of economic and social hardship. They came to this country because they wanted to form a communist society where everything was held in common for the benefit of all. Their goal was to establish a society where the last man standing gets everything. And under no circumstances was this meant to be a religious society. Now, is that the story you all know? No. How about this one? George Rapp and his followers left Wurttemberg because of religious persecution. They did want to establish a communal or communist society where everything was shared by all for the good of everybody. Their goal was to prepare for the second coming of Christ, and that's what they toiled towards. And that their wealth that they were accumulating was being created to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem and for Christ to use as he saw fit when he came. Does that story sound a little more familiar? Okay, that's what I thought. Well, that in essence is what the lawsuit was all about. That was filed in 1910. The Harmony Society was dissolved in December of 1905, and in June of 1910, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania filed a lawsuit against the Harmony Society. And in that lawsuit, they basically wanted to answer several questions. Number one, was the Harmony Society a religious society? Number two, should everything escheat to the Commonwealth according to the law of 1855? And the escheat laws of 1855 basically said that unincorporated religious societies or cultural institutions could not own property over $30,000, and if they ceased to exist, everything was to be turned over to the state. So that all goes back to, was the society a religious society? Another question that was kind of tied to that is, when the society was closed, was it closed legally, with Franz Gilman and Susie Duss splitting everything in 1905? And then the other question was, what about all the property that the Harmony Society owned and sold after the law of 1855 was passed? Well, here's what a couple of the late trustees had to say about the Harmony Society. And one of the things that makes this kind of project very difficult is we have a very extensive archive, and trying to look for things to justify, the points of the lawsuit was difficult, but it was interesting, some of the things that I was able to find. And here are some of the beliefs regarding the Harmony Society that Jacob Henrici and Jonathan Lenz, two of the later trustees, had to say. And this particular piece was something that Jacob Henrici told a group of reporters on the 81st anniversary of the Society's creation in 1886. And he said, "There is no truth in the story that when our membership is reduced to 5, our property is to be divided and our society dissolved. Our organization will be maintained till there is only one of us left, and then that one will still comprise the society. We firmly believe in the visible, personal reign of Christ on earth, and that his second advent will take place before the last member of the society shall have passed away. If that belief is realized, all our possessions will be laid at the feet of the Master to be disposed of as he shall deem best. But if our belief is a mistaken one, and death should wipe us out before that glorious second coming, it is highly probable that the state of Pennsylvania would be glad to employ our savings as an aid in payment of her heavy debt." A little later in 1886, an attorney, Theodore Barr, had written to Jacob Henrici about an individual down in Cincinnati who was a descendant of a Harmonist who had died, looking to see whether there was anything that this individual could inherit. And in this letter, Jacob Henrici basically stated that all property of the society is held in common without right of survivorship or heirship. He also went on to state that those specifics were upheld, as well as the Articles of Association for the Harmony Society, not only by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, but also by the Supreme Court of the United States. And then also in 1886, Jonathan Lenz, the junior trustee, wrote to Christian Ebert over in Wurttemberg, expressing the same ideas. And basically, Jonathan Lenz said, "It is contrary to the Harmony Society's religious teachings to dissolve the society. It is contrary to make a testament or will, since everything belonged to the society, you couldn't give it away via a will. It was contrary to convert society property to personal property, and everything should go to Pennsylvania if Christ does not return before the last member dies." So it was very obvious in the late 1880s that the two trustees understood that if Christ didn't come and everybody died off, the Commonwealth would receive everything. And then along comes John Duss in 1890, and in 1892 becomes a trustee, and Susie Duss also becomes the last trustee in 1903. And we have an extensive collection of John Duss's papers. He wrote extensively about the Harmony Society, his thoughts, his beliefs. And again, looking through that haystack, this was an interesting piece that I found. And this was chapter 14, a draft of a book that John was writing. It did not make the two books that I know of that we have in our library. But John said, "Due to the custom of celibacy, the public at large had long since taken for granted the extinction of the society. Concomitant with this supposition arose the query, what is to become of the economy millions? The answer to that, especially in later years, had coalesced into, presumably the lawyers will get it all. Furthermore, the prophecy might have come true had I not spoiled it all." So John Duss definitely had, I think, intentions as the society was dwindling down that were counter to what you had just heard from Jacob Henrici and Jonathan Lenz, and I think going all the way back to George Rapp. And so the lawsuit began in 1910, and again, the state's attorneys were trying to prove that the Harmony Society was a religious society, and that as such, it had no heirs. And therefore, when it ceased to exist, everything should go to the state based upon the laws of 1855 and 1901. John Duss and his attorneys had different views. They laid out a very different case, and since access to the vast archives was limited, and as we know, much of the archive is written in German or Swabian German and very difficult to read, it was very difficult for the Commonwealth to mount a successful case. One of the books that's on display over here this evening is about the court case. And the front of the book lays out what the state's arguments were, and then the back of the book lays out John Duss's deposition and what his attorneys were trying to prove in the case. And it's very interesting to look at the book because there are many notes in the margins about, we'll agree to this, don't agree to that, make the state prove this. And it's very difficult for somebody to prove something if they don't have access to the records. And as I said, the records were very extensive. So the case that the Duss team was laying out was that the Harmony Society was an economic society and not a religious society. And a few of the things that were in the deposition, and I only picked out a few of them, John Duss said the community was not a religious society, that there was a church in town, the town of Economy, at which those members of the community who saw fit attended, but there was never any religious tenet or belief necessary to membership in the community. One of the next things he said is none of the property of the Harmony community were ever donated to it for any religious or charitable use whatsoever. That they worked on the communistic doctrine, which necessarily involved the doctrine of survivorship. And I worked in real estate for a brief period of time, and one of the things that is in a lot of real estate is that the rights of survivorship, that if I were to die, my wife would get everything or my kids would get everything, and that's what this is all coming out of. But not one of the articles of association written by the Harmony Society, and there were many written from 1805 all the way up to 1903, I think, was the last one. Not one of them mentions the right of survivorship. And the other thing is that the right of survivorship is very counter to what the communist doctrine is all about. The communists weren't about, growing all this wealth and then giving it to the last one. They were about everybody sharing in common and the society going on forever. So this was very anti what the Harmony Society was really formed for and was really all about. But the last thing that surprised me was, the society was not formed for the purpose of the worship of God or the cultivation or enforcement of any peculiar religious cult or beliefs. And John goes on to say that some of the members were atheists, some were Catholics, and others belonged to many different branches of different churches. And I would imagine that all of them that came over from Wurttemberg in the early 1800s, all going up were Lutherans who left the Lutheran Church as we know it, and we have a lot of documentation that talks about how strong their faith is and all. And so this was just amazing to hear. But I think the case really boiled down to this last piece. And this says, while this proceeding is utterly unfounded in law, yet in fact it unsettles and clouds the title and depreciates the value of the properties now in hands of thousands of purchasers for value. And this goes back to the escheat law of 1855. In that law, it said that unincorporated religious societies or charitable societies were forbidden to own property in excess of $30,000. And we know that the Harmony Society purchased 3,000 acres here, had extensive houses and buildings and mills and everything here in the town of Economy. Then you add on what they owned in Beaver Falls, what they had in Tidiute, they had lands in Michigan, they had lands in counties all over the place. The value of their properties was well in excess of $30,000. And what the Duss team tried to argue was if the Commonwealth were to win the case, and the society was named a religious society, then all of the sales, both by the society, going back to 1855, as well as the sales by the society to others, would have been illegal, and the Commonwealth would have had to go back and try to clear all of those titles. And there were thousands of properties that were bought and sold in that time period. And so, after 5 years of litigation and various meetings and conferences, the state and John Duss and his defendants decided to settle the case. And in the laws of Pennsylvania in 1915, the House of Representatives passed a resolution which the Senate concurred with and the governor concurred with as well, to basically settle the case. And in that law, it stated that the Commonwealth would accept the property known as the Great House Block and the Music Hall Block, and they also would receive $15,000 in cash. And then in addition to that, they would release all of the other property not included in the settlement, whatever was held by John and Susie Duss or Franz Gilman or the various land companies that had it or anybody else that had Harmonist property would be able to keep it. And the last thing that it said in that resolution was that the Attorney General and the Treasurer were to work with their legal counsel to basically make the case go away. And so we get to the verdict that was agreed to on February 3rd of 1916. And that verdict was a split verdict. And in that verdict, the jury found for the plaintiff, for the Commonwealth, and did provide the Commonwealth with ownership of the Great House Block and the Music Hall Block and the $15,000 that was discussed. But it also held for the defendants and found that John and Susie Duss, Franz Gilman, and the land companies could retain any property, both personal or real property, and any other assets that they held at that time that belonged to the society. And then this is the point that I mentioned at the beginning that really still irks me, and I would love to see if there was a way that we could get this changed. It basically said, and we further find that none of the said property ever was or is held by any religious society or for any religious or charitable uses. And the reason that they did that was to settle the lawsuit, not just in 1950, but forever. And so that is a very short and brief version of what transpired between 1910 and 1916. And that's how Old Economy ended up becoming the first state historic site, owned by the Commonwealth, operated, placed with the Pennsylvania Historical Commission in 1919, and currently operated by the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission. So that's how we got started, and at this point I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about the lawsuit.